Dune Awakening has been fully released for around 3 weeks now, and it's a roaring success with over 1 million copies sold, making Dune Awakening Funcom's most successful release yet. And for me, personally, it's been an excellent game. Until now. Now, 3 weeks in, a large part of the player base has reached the endgame, myself included. And there's a big problem. After enjoying hundreds of hours of well-paced, well-thought-out PvE gameplay, narrative and progression, designed to prepare you for the endgame, thousands of players are just now coming to the realization that Dune Awakening's endgame, and in fact Dune for that matter, is centered around the conflict between House Atreides and House Harkonnen. In this game's case, that means PvP.
May thy knife chip and shatter.
And instead of adapting to this realization of the game's long-touted endgame and original vision, some players have instead asked Funcom to simply change it.
The Haga Basin is 98% PvE, the Deep Desert is
So we have the
98%
shipwrecks.
PvP.
And Funcom did. Already barely 3 weeks in, Joel Bolos, the creative director, is compromising the original pitch and vision for the game without trialing, testing, or consulting the thousands of players who backed Dune Awakening with a full understanding of its original vision. Now, Funcom has made sweeping fundamental changes to the endgame by reducing the size of the Deep Desert by a massive 50%, the PvP endgame zone that represents the most dangerous part of Arrakis, while donating the other 50% to non-PvP, aka PvE, players exclusively, featuring some of the same rewards and resources found in the now smaller, higher-risk PvP slice of the game. And that decision is far more damaging for both types of players than people realize. So why is this a problem, and could this be the slow blade that threatens to put Dune to sleep before it's even fully awakened? First, I know some of you will already be sitting there ready to wave the flag of your chosen side, whether that be PvE, PvP, or both. So let me try to explain the nuanced perspective of PvP players and PvE players alike, and why this is such a controversial decision for the future of the game. Let me explain from the perspective of PvP players to begin with. And no, it's got nothing to do with wanting a conveyor belt of easy-fed targets and gankable victims, which is the common outcry and frankly strawman argument presented by PvE players repeatedly during these discussions in any game that throws both playstyles together. While there are definitely some major losers out there who want to make life miserable for everyone, they do not represent the majority of players who want to participate in PvP and are a symptom of anonymity and human nature colliding with abusable game mechanics. Unfortunately, the former can't be fixed, but the latter can. The appeal of open world PvP is the unpredictable nature of player versus player conflict, driving continuous, emergent, organic gameplay opportunities without the requirement for developer interference, aside from typical balancing, tweaks, and overseeing of the open world environment. This asymmetry of risk is what makes open world games what they are. The imbalance is the entire point. It's what encourages creativity, cooperation, and memorable moments. Open world PvP games typically provide the tools, while the players provide the content, honing skills, logistics, and alliances to survive and thrive. In Dune Awakening, the positive result of this group effort means temporarily controlling small parts of the previously massive Deep Desert in order to harvest and mine the game's most precious late-game resource, spice, while accruing other higher-tier resources and schematics. These allow you to create stronger armor, weapons, vehicle structures, and build the logistical backbone that helps you remain competitive against your open-world rivals. Of course, this isn't and was never supposed to be the only way to play in the Deep Desert or contribute to the end game. Like the Fremen, roaming solo or in small groups is entirely possible, hitting small patches of spice, rushing test stations, and harvesting ore with the ever-present chance of running into an enemy patrol or like-minded individuals for a shaky piece. It's all about the excitement of high risk versus high reward, and being prepared for the unknown and bringing the right tools for the job. All fundamental aspects of a good survival game. Now, let's look at this from the PvE perspective, before the changes took effect. The PvE players who have enjoyed hundreds of hours of exclusive, curated PvE gameplay up to this point now find themselves stuck, with wanting access to the rewards located inside the endgame Deep Desert, but without any of the aforementioned risk. And when you consider that most PvE players are solo-oriented, risk-averse, and less socially inclined to find a guild, it creates a problem. And so with this recent change of cutting the Deep Desert in half and giving 50% of it to PvE players, they're being handed top-tier resources with little requirements to earn them, and no current PvE endgame loop where that gear is actually going to be useful. There are no endgame raids, no elite bosses, no advanced PvE challenges. It's just another dead end. And I'm not saying they shouldn't get anything, I'm just saying this isn't the answer. So what is the solution? First, let's discuss Funcom's current choice to cut the Deep Desert in half, which, in my opinion, is completely the wrong way to go about fixing the problem. One theory is that by giving PvE players 50% of the Deep Desert to gather endgame resources risk-free, it would help them feel more comfortable entering PvP later. But this also gives PvP players a new risk-free shortcut to the same resources, turning competition into who waits longest for a respawn instead of fighting for control. Competition is human nature. Now you'll simply find people building structures around contested resources in the PvE zones and blocking others from acquiring them via other means instead. Now, PvP zones are filled with players who already got geared up without contest, creating an even greater skill and gear gap for risk-averse PvE players. The PvP zone is smaller now, more densely packed and less accessible to solo players. Fewer grids means fewer strategic options. Bigger guilds can now dominate with less effort. The sandbox has shrunk. This shift turns the Deep Desert into something it was never meant to be, more like a PvP arena than an open, living, breathing, organic world. With such a huge reduction in space and all the PvP-centric players being forced into the zone, it's becoming more of a boring kill box. Economically, flooding the game with high-tier resources from safe zones also tanks their value, and the players who risked everything to earn that gear now compete with PvE players who never had to leave the safety of the zone. There were better ways Funcom could have handled this, ways that it respected the PvP loop and gave PvE players a reason to stay engaged. First, they could have used the Overland map. It already exists. Expand PvE gameplay there with tougher NPCs, raids, or unique survival challenges. Offer similar rewards in smaller quantities or lower potency, creating an alternative form of gameplay and progression. I suspect this was the plan all along, but Funcom caved too soon to the pressure. Second, they could build proper social tools. Many PvE or solo players might want to try the Deep Desert with a group, but Funcom gives them no easy way to find groups, guilds, or allies in the game. You want players to participate in the Deep Desert? Help them get there. Third, and something I really think should have been the case from the start, make the Deep Desert a faction-based war zone. Right now, everyone is hostile to everybody, which just creates chaos. But a true Atreides versus Harkonnen conflict, with a third faction later, would bring structure and shifting front lines. Players would begin to know where the safe zones were and what was controlled by their faction, giving them space to move around, harvest, or gather resources peacefully. That's the sort of meaningful PvP we want, not just open slaughter. I think that's something PvE players don't understand. We don't just want PvP for the sake of it, we want it to mean something. Fourth, they could have just iterated, man. Started with a smaller PvE strip, not 50% of the Deep Desert. See how it plays out and scale as needed. What we got instead was a knee-jerk reaction and abandonment of a promised feature that so many of us were excited to take part in. I strongly believe Funcom's knee-jerk decision was one of the worst I've ever seen at the beginning of a game's life. This has done irreparable damage to their reputation and trust with their player base, and I personally am very disappointed in Joel's decision here to completely shift on his pitch of this game and its initial vision, which has so much promise and started off so well. If this is how Funcom handles pressure now, what happens next? I'm eager for all of us to find a solution that works best for everyone. It's not over yet. If there's any game that can do it, it's Dune Awakening with its clever overland map and server meshing system. As always, thank you so much for watching, and thank you to all my meeting members for your continued support, and welcome to my newest member, Dead Tired. Your support is greatly appreciated, my friend. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.